Hey everyone, Ruslan Belov here. Today's episode is packed. Before we get started, I genuinely ask you to support my work by subscribing to the channel and hitting the like button. It makes a real difference for the channel's reach. Thank you. We'll start with the story that's all over the news. A drone, allegedly Russian, struck Romanian territory. This situation once again showed us, in very clear terms, what NATO's Article 5 is actually worth in practice. Then we'll go through the front, where over the past 24 hours, several truly significant events took place. 4 settlements came under the control of our army in a single day, a record for May. So settle in, because there's a lot to unpack. I'll get into the Romanian strike in detail at the end, but before we break down each sector individually, let's set the overall picture. Over the past day, the army took control of 4 settlements. 2 were taken by the North grouping in Kharkiv Oblast, 1 by the Center grouping in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, and 1 more by the East grouping, also in Dnipropetrovsk. In terms of settlements taken in a single day, this became the best result of the entire month of May. The total territorial gain was around 18 square kilometers. The AFU also had a small result. In Zaporizhzhia Oblast, near the village of Ternovato, they pushed into the residential part of the village and reclaimed roughly 1 square kilometer. Fighting there continues. 1 square kilometer against 18. That's the arithmetic of the day. Now let's break it down in detail. Kharkiv direction. Vovchansk sector. The pace continues. We'll start with the North grouping and Kharkiv Oblast, because this is where the most interesting things have been happening for several days running. So, the settlement of Kharkiv has been taken on the Vovchansk sector. Kharkiv and Budarki have been liberated. This matters because not long ago it seemed like we'd be grinding here month after month, just like we did in the Vovchansk farmsteads. We spent 3 months taking those farmsteads, hard work, meter by meter. But Volokhovka, Bochkova, Zibina, Pokolyana, Chaykivka, and now Budarki and Kharkiv, all of these fell one after another within just a few days. Neither the additional Ukrainian reinforcements rushed in as a fire brigade, nor the farm buildings that could have been used as defensive anchors. None of it helped. All the settlements along the defensive line to the east of the Vovchansk farmsteads have now been taken. The line has been straightened and pushed forward. Fighting is currently underway for Okremivka. The AFU are holding there. That's a fact, I won't sugarcoat it. But the outcome is already decided. The only question is timing. Will it happen in the final days of May or early June? My estimate is 1 week, 2 at most. Okremivka will come under our army's control. Alongside the Vovchansk sector, work is continuing on the Veliki Burluk direction. To the next settlement, the town of Bilyi Kolodiaz, there are nearly 10 kilometers of open fields and a narrow tree line, which both sides will use for the covert movement of assault groups. Resistance was broken in Budarki, and the forest area between Krula and Zemlyanka was cleared. Now look at the map. Our units are moving toward each other from 2 sides. The distance between them is around 16 kilometers. That sounds like a lot, but let's do the math properly. Both groups are moving toward each other, so each one only needs to cover about 8 kilometers. For comparison, during May alone, our forces covered 6.5 kilometers on the Vovchansk sector. So by mid-July, it's entirely realistic that the 2 wedges will link up and form a continuous front line stretching roughly 60 kilometers. From Izbitska all the way to Zemlyanka at the border. That would be a serious result. Sumy Oblast. Silence doesn't mean a pause. This is important. Don't let the absence of loud headlines fool you. For the past few days, there's been very little coming out of Sumy Oblast, and some people have started drawing the conclusion that things have stalled there. They haven't. Operational silence is part of the job. An active offensive is underway. It's just at a stage where talking about it too early would be the wrong move. What we do know, an offensive has been launched from Aratutin toward Lizny. A second offensive has been launched from Zapsil toward Velika Rybitsia. On the second of those axes, there's even a specific episode worth mentioning. Our drones caught up with a pickup truck carrying AFU soldiers who were trying to escape along a road protected by an anti-drone corridor. They thought they were safe. They weren't. They used the road in the wrong place at the wrong time. I won't show the footage or the details right now. You'll understand why. In short, things are moving along in Sumy Oblast. Expect good news soon. Mezhevska direction, 5 months, and the finish line. Now to the center grouping and what happened in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. The village of Novopidorodny on the Mezhevska direction has finally been taken. The assault began back at the end of December of last year. 5 months passed. Let me clarify right away so there's no wrong impression. This doesn't mean 5 months of relentless, brutal assault operations with no progress. Not at all. It was steady pressure with small forces, with pauses methodically, and it worked. The result is there. But what's far more interesting is something else. Russia's Minister of Defense, Andrei Belousov, addressing the soldiers of the 433rd Guards Regiment who took Novopidhorodny, said the following: "Continuing your victorious advance, you have liberated the settlement of Novopidhorodny from the enemy, the liberation of which creates conditions for the advance of the entire troop grouping." That phrase, "creates conditions for the advance of the entire troop grouping," is not a routine one. Ministers of Defense don't throw words like that around casually. It's a hint, a fairly transparent one, that a shift in the main axis of the center grouping's attack, away from Dobropilya and toward the Mezhevsky direction, may be in the works. Why does this matter? Let me explain it plainly, without a map. Dobropilya is a fortress. There are literally several defensive lines, one after another. Triple rows of trenches, then more trenches with wire obstacles. From the east, dragon's teeth and additional barriers, and yet another line immediately behind the city itself. And behind Bilozerske, another one. So it's not 2 lines, it's 5 defensive belts in a row. That means incredibly hard work, guaranteed high casualties, and a very long timeline. The Mezhevsky direction is also fortified, no illusions there. But there are 2 defensive belts, not 5. The truly serious defensive line is 30 kilometers further west, near Vasilkivska. That means the entire corridor up to that line could potentially be pushed through over the course of the summer campaign. And taking Novopidorodny would close the junction with the east grouping, which is already a significant operational objective in its own right. I'm not claiming the decision has been made. Maybe I'm reading too much into the minister's words. Maybe Dobropilya will remain the main objective for the summer after all. We'll see. But personally, a shift toward the Mezhevsky direction strikes me as the more rational choice from the standpoint of cost versus result. East, river crossing and advance to the forest line. And one more settlement taken over the past day, also in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, in the east grouping's area of responsibility. Here, our soldiers crossed the Vovcha River, secured a foothold in the forest on the opposite bank, advanced to Lizny, and took it under control. The next task is to consolidate in the forest area to the west. If that succeeds, it will open the possibility of pushing toward Velika Mikhailivka. Control over Velika Mikhailivka, in turn, opens the road toward Mala Mikhailivka from the south and toward Oleksandrivka from the east. That's a whole cascade of operational opportunities, currently still a prospect, but already a concrete one. And here's what's fundamentally important. If our forces manage to enter Velika Mikhailivka and build on that success, the entire so-called February success of the AFU in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, those positions they managed to improve in the early part of this year, will be completely wiped out. That's not a minor thing. It would mean the elimination of everything they managed to carve out over several months of work on this direction. What does all of this mean? Taken together, let's pull the picture together because individual fragments don't give you the full understanding. First, Kharkiv Oblast. The pace on the Vovchansk sector is genuinely high, higher than expected. Settlements are being taken faster than projected. Okremivka is the next target, and it will fall. The prospect of the 2 wedges linking up and forming a unified 60-kilometer front line by mid-July is entirely realistic. Second, Sumy Oblast. It's quiet, but the work is happening. Results are coming. Third, the Mezhevsky direction, potentially the most interesting from the standpoint of operational prospects. Belousov's words were not random words. If the center grouping genuinely shifts its axis, this summer could become very eventful right here. Fourth, the east, crossing the Vovcha and reaching Lisny, is the groundwork for a serious push on Velika Mikhailivka. Watch this one closely. And fifth, Romania and NATO. The story of the drone that hit a residential building in Galați ended with statements. No consequences. That's not news, it's confirmation of what was obvious from the very beginning. Article 5 exists on paper. In real life, it functions exactly as far as it's politically convenient for the alliance's leading members. In this case, it wasn't convenient, so they settled for words. I haven't changed my view on this since 2022, and current events only reinforce it. Now let me circle back to Romania, because this story deserves a proper look on its own, not just a passing mention. In the early hours of May 29th, during yet another mass drone strike on Ukraine, one of the UAVs, believed to be a Shahed 136, or as we call it, a Geran 2, crossed into Romanian airspace and slammed into a residential apartment block in the city of Galați on the Danube. 2 residents were hospitalized. Romanian air defense scrambled, 2 F-16s and a helicopter were airborne. They were authorized to engage. They didn't manage to intercept the drone in time. Think about that for a moment. This is a NATO country. It has been in a state of heightened readiness for over 4 years. It operates American-built fighters. And a slow propeller-driven kamikaze drone, the kind that Ukraine shoots down by the dozens every single night, flew into a Romanian city and hit an apartment building while the interceptors were still trying to catch up with it. The Romanian military explained this by pointing to limited reaction time and peacetime rules of engagement. In other words, the legal framework they operate under in normal conditions slowed them down even in a situation that was anything but normal. And what came next from the alliance? A statement from NATO spokeswoman Alison Hart, calling Russia's actions reckless. A phone call between Secretary-General Mark Rutte and Romanian officials. A press conference from Romanian Prime Minister Ilie Bolojan, declaring the situation unacceptable and promising to sign a contract for new counter-drone systems. President Dan repeated that Russia bears responsibility and said he'd raise the equipment question at the next NATO meeting. That's it. That's the full list. Nobody invoked Article 4, the mechanism that allows any NATO member to formally place a security threat on the table for collective discussion. Not Article 5, not Article 4, nothing formal at all, just bilateral phone calls and public statements of outrage. And you know what struck me most? This wasn't the first time. It wasn't even close to the first time. Russian drones have entered Romanian airspace at least 28 times since the full-scale war began. 28. And each time the response has been the same: concern, condemnation, consultations. This time a drone actually hit a building and put people in hospital, and the response was still the same. Slightly louder, but structurally identical. I said it back in 2022, and I'll say it again now. The idea that NATO would go to war with Russia over a Polish logistics hub, a Baltic capital, or a Romanian city was always a political fiction dressed up in legal language. Nobody in Brussels or Washington is going to trade nuclear-armed escalation for the sake of Article 5 obligations toward a country on the alliance's eastern edge. The Galați incident proved it with complete clarity. Not because the alliance is weak in a military sense, it's not, but because the political will to actually fight, rather than to talk about fighting, simply isn't there at the level the treaty implies. NATO is a club with a well-written charter. The charter says all members will treat an attack on one as an attack on all. What actually happens is, all members will issue a joint statement treating an attack on one as deeply regrettable and wholly unacceptable. Those are not the same thing, and everyone in Moscow knows it. That's the only thing that really matters here. Write what you think in the comments. Do you believe Article 5 would actually be triggered if things escalated further? I read everything. That's all for today. Subscribe, hit the like button if this was useful, and I'll see you in the next episode.